Hello everyone, welcome to iFashy. Today's tutorial will be teaching us how to make this beautiful corset top. It's a very versatile top that can be worn on dresses or even pants. And trust me, it is also very easy to make. So guys, let's get into this tutorial. Before we begin, I want to say a very big thank you to all of you for all of your support so far. If you haven't subscribed to iFashy channel, please click on that subscribe button. Do well to support us by clicking on that subscribe button. So here is the pattern paper that we are going to be drafting on, and the first thing I'm going to do is to mark out the starting line at the top of my paper. Also, I've gone ahead to place this pattern paper on fold. The reason we folded it is because, as you can see on your screen, the both sides of the hem of this top is not equal. It is asymmetric, so we're going to have to fold our pattern to be able to get one side low and one side high. So I'm going to go ahead and label this first line as our shoulder line, where we're going to be taking all of our measurements downwards from. So from this shoulder, I'm going to come down with 10 inches, which is the bust point. And after that, I'll go down with the under bust measurements, which is 13.5. After that, I'll also go down with the front waist measurement, which is 17.5. After marking all of these points, I'll remark them again so that my straight lines will be equal. And then I'll go ahead and use a straight ruler to connect all these lines. And then we'll label the lines, the bust line, the under bust, and the waistline. After marking out these lines, we're going to go downwards from our waist width 9 inches, which will serve as our hip line. This top extended to the hip on one side, so we're going to have to take 9 inches downwards, or 10, depends on your hip extension measurement. And then you go ahead and label that line the hip line. Now we have all these lines out, let's go ahead and take the chest line. Now, as we already know, to get your chest line, you're going to divide your bust measurements by 6 and add 1.5 to your answer. That gave me 7.6, so I'll impute it here, and then that point is going to be marked as my chest line. So on this chest line, I took my shoulder measurement divided by 2. That's the point the chest line started from, and then I'll use my pencil to mark a broken line on this chest line because I don't need it fully. We will just be needing it later to know where the top will extend to on the chest part. Now that we have the broken lines out there on the chest, we're going to go ahead and take our nipple to nipple measurements on the bust line, the under bust line, on the waistline, and then we'll extend it down to the hip line. After marking those bust span points, I'll use my straight ruler to connect these points together so that we can take our under bust tightening dart on the under bust line. Now, to get my dart, what I'm going to do is to minus my under bust circumference from my bust circumference, and then I'll divide my answer by 2. Remember, this pattern paper is folded into 2. So after removing my under bust circumference from my bust circumference, I have 5 inches. And when I divide 5 inches by 2, it means I'm going to be taking out 2.5. And to take out that 2.5, I will not mark it equally. I want ½ inch to be on the center front, and 2 inches will go towards the side front because the side front carries the bigger part of our bust, right? So I'll mark that out now, and I'll use my straight ruler to connect these lines all the way down to the full length of the top. So after connecting these lines, I'm going to use my straight ruler to make a connection from the under bust to the bust line on the center front, and then on the side front, I'll use my curve ruler to make a connection from the under bust point to the bust point. So now that we have our bust curve out, we're going to go ahead and start taking our body measurements on all of these horizontal lines, starting with the shoulder measurement. Remember, on this shoulder line, you're going to take your shoulder measurement divided by 2, mark out that point, and then come down with 1 inch for your shoulder slope. This is because our shoulder is not straight. We don't need this upper part of this top, remember? This is just in case you want to add a yoke to your corset, so you know how to get the upper part, right? So now I'm going to take the same shoulder measurements on my chest line, and then I'll connect it upwards to meet the shoulder slope where we came down with 1 inch. And then I'll go ahead and take a regular round neck measurement, go inwards with 3.3, come down with 3.3, and just mark that out using my pencil. This is because we don't need this part of this top. So I'll use my curve ruler to connect the curve at the neck, and then I'll connect from that neck to meet the shoulder slope. Now on this straight shoulder line, we're going to divide what we have here by 2. I have 7 inches, so I'll mark the midpoint, which is 3.5, and come inwards on that midpoint with 0.5 because we want to use our curve ruler to mark out the armhole curve. Now, in order to know where the curve on the armhole is going to stop, you're going to go ahead and take your bust measurement on this chest line, bust measurement divided by 4. So I'll mark out my answer there, and I'll use my curve ruler to make a connection from this bust measurement through the 0.5 we came in with up to the shoulder point, and that will give us our armhole curve, right? Now let's move to the next one. We'll have to impute our measurements on all of these lines. The bust measurement on the bust line divided by 4, yeah? There's no dots in there to replace. So we'll go straight to the under bust line and take our under bust measurement divided by 4. Now when you take your under bust measurement divided by 4, on this point, remember to impute your darts back. These darts that were cutting off, remember to replace it after taking that under bust measurement. The same thing goes for the waist measurement. You take your waist measurement divided by 4 and then you replace the darts that we have on that waist point. Now when we finish with the waist, we'll go down to the hip line and take our hip measurements divided by 4. After marking out your hip measurement divided by 4, you're going to replace the darts and then you go ahead and add 1 inch extra because the hip extension is a bit structured. So you're going to have to add 1 inch to make it go further than your hip line so that it doesn't come out very tight on that hip point. So I'll use my ruler to connect all these measurements that we've taken out together from the waist up to the armhole, from the armhole down to the hip line. And then we'll move to the next one, which is taking out the side bust darts. Now, the importance of taking out this side bust darts is to make sure our back is laying very flat and also for our front and back to align equally when we join them together on the sides. Remember, the back and front waist measurements is not the same. For the measurements that I'm working with, the front waistline is 17.5, while the back waistline is 16 inches. So we're going to have to remove that 1.5 inch difference as the side bust dart. So these are the darts that we're going to be cutting off from this front piece. The next thing we're going to do now is to work on the overbust part. At this point, you're going to determine how high you want yours to be on this overbust. If you want it fully covered, you can go ahead and measure yourself from the bust point upwards to know how high you want it to be covered, right? So for me, I'm going to be going up with 3.5 inches from the bust line. Remember, the bust line is on our nipple. So I'm going up with 3.5 inches upwards from the nipple to cover my cleavage. You can walk around yours. This one is not standard. It depends on how covered you want yours to be. After going up with 3.5, I'll extend that line upwards to meet that point. And I'll also go ahead and take out my darts on this straight line. So you're going to make sure what you have here is your overbust circumference divided by 4 so that it will be seated firmly on my overbust. We're going to be using our overbust measurements to take out these darts. Now remember, we took our bust measurements on this chest line when we were marking out our armhole curve, yeah? Now my bust circumference is 39 and the overbust circumference is 36, which means I have 3 inches difference. So I'm going to divide that 3 inches by 2 and I'll have 1.5, yeah? So I'm sharing 1.5 on the 2 sides of this straight line. And then I'll use this curved ruler to connect the darts that we're going to be taking out there. Why did we mark 1.5 here? Is because this paper is on fold. The other 1.5 is on the other side of the paper. So this particular dart, will cut it off so that the chest part will sit firmly on the chest. Now the next thing we're going to do on this part now is to mark out the shape of the neckline that you want. If you look at this corset closely, the center front is it has a sweetheart neckline. So you're going to go ahead and just do the type of neckline that you want here. I'm using a pencil to mark out this point first of all. From one end of the dart, I connected it to meet the armhole. And from the end of the other dart, I'll connect it as well to meet the center front. Now this part that I connected to meet the armhole, you can make it as high as you want it or as low as you want it. Now I have 2 dotted lines here. Whichever one I choose to follow, if I want it low or high, I'll follow any of them, right? Now, for the one going towards the center front, is a sweetheart neckline, yeah? So what we're going to determine is how deep you want it to be in your center front. So from this bust line, I'm going to go up with 1.5, which means this sweetheart neckline will start a little above my bust. So I went up with 1.5 and I marked it so that the curve coming from this other side of the dart will end on my 1.5. That is how deep I want the sweetheart neckline to be. This is not standard, like I mentioned before. Go ahead and mark it. Depends on how deep you want yours to be. The reason I'm not marking this other side yet, for this corset, one side is higher than the other side, as you can see on your screen. So when I open up this pattern paper, I'm going to make one side higher than the other side. But before we go ahead and open the pattern paper, if you notice, the armhole is deeper than the normal armhole. The corset is not sitting exactly on the armhole. So we're going to come down with 0.5 on this armhole point. That's where this neckline is going to connect to when we are cutting. Okay? Now we have our measurements taken out on this front part. It's very, very easy. The next part we're going to go to now is the design we have at the hem of this top. This is completely optional. If you want this exact design, go ahead and watch closely and see how I am doing mine. If not, you can just go ahead and create any asymmetric design you want on your hemline. So the first thing I did is to come down with 5 inches from my waistline. This is because obviously one side came down lower than the other side. The short side, I'm going to be using this 5 inches for it, while the long side will come down a little below my hip line, with about 0.5 inches below this hip line, so that when I'm marking my curve, the curve will come out pronounced. So I'm going to use my pencil to roughly sketch out how curved I want this down part to be. And when I'm satisfied with my curve, I'll go ahead and use the marker to highlight it so that we will see what we have there. And now when you're marking out your curve, at this broken line, remember this dot line is going to be broken. Measure what you have on this point and continue with that same measurement on the other point, so that when you join your center front to your side front, it will be equal. If you don't measure it, you just go ahead and curve it anyhow. By the time you join, one might come out longer than the other, right? So that's why you saw me took my measurements on that dot line. So after roughly sketching it out now, I'm going to go ahead and use my marker to highlight this curve that we're going to be following. And also, another thing you should take note of, you must not cut out this curve on your pattern paper. You can just go ahead and cut straight on your fabric, and after sewing, you place it on your mannequin and use your chalk to mark out this curve to come out however you want it to be, because I think it is even easier that way, because the top has been joined together already. What you just need to do is to mark it with your chalk how curvy you want that down part to be. It's very, very simple, okay? What I'm going to do now is to use my tracing wheel to trace out all of these marks to be showing on the other side, and I'll open up my pattern paper so that you see what we have on the full front of this corset top. So after tracing and highlighting it on the other side of the paper, this is what we have on our full front. The remaining thing now is to mark out the shorter side of this top. Remember, this other side has already been marked as the longer side. So on this other side now, I'm going to come down with 5 inches like I mentioned before, and I'll also connect the upper parts, okay? So I'll mark 5 inches downwards from my waistline. You can use 4, depends on how tall you are, depends on where you want yours to stop, okay? So after coming down with 4, I'll go ahead and sketch it roughly with my pencil again to try and get the curve. Remember, one side is lower than the other side. And also remember, you can skip this part, cut it straight on your fabric, and then mark out this asymmetric design after joining your fabric together. So this is what the curve is going to look like when you're done, okay? So what we're going to do now is to label our patterns. We have the side front 1, the center front, and the side front 2. The reason we have these 2 side fronts is because one side is higher than the other side, both on the neckline and on the hem line, okay? So after marking this out now, that will be that for this front, for the drafting of the front of this corset top. Remember, you can do any type of neckline or any type of hemline you want to do. What you just need to learn are the basics, how to get your measurements, how to take out the darts to make it fitted on your body. And that's that for this front part. The next part we're going to be drafting now is the back pattern. So I'll keep this front aside now and work on the back pattern. So for this paper we're going to be using for the back, I didn't place it on fold because one side is just enough, okay? So, and also we have our basic lines marked out: the shoulder line, the chest line, the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. Remember how we got all these lines for the front? From the waistline, we came down with 9 inches to get our hip line, okay? And also remember that the back waistline is shorter than the front waistline. Go ahead and take your measurements and use your exact measurement. So on these basic lines now, we're going to be taking our body measurement. But first, before we start taking out our measurements, we need to mark out the armhole point. So first of all, we'll come down with 1 inch from the shoulder line to mark our shoulder slope, and we'll connect it to meet the chest line. We already did this for front, right? And I guess we'll remember how we achieved that armhole curve. So we're also going to be taking out the back neck. Come down with 1 inch for the back neck. We don't need this back yoke, remember? But in case you want to add a yoke to yours, you know how to achieve that. So after marking out the back neck and make your connection from the neck to the shoulder, we're also going to mark the midpoint of this armhole line, right? And we'll mark the middle. Then we'll go ahead and take our bust measurements on this chest line so that we can connect our armhole curve to this point. Now that the armhole is out, we are going to go ahead and take our nipple to nipple measurements on these lines so that we can mark out the back darts. Back is very, very simple, guys. So you just go ahead and take your bust span measurement divided by 2 on the bust line, on the waistline, and then you extend your dart with 6.5 inches from the waist downwards. And you also take the bust span measurement on that dart extension before you connect it together with a straight ruler. This back dart did not extend up to the hip line because the top at the back will not get to the hip line at that center back, so that you can sit comfortably. So we're going to go ahead now and take our waist dart on this waist line. I'll be using 1.5 inch to snatch my waist at the back, which is 0.75 on the left and 0.75 on the right. And I'll use my straight ruler to connect from these two darts upwards to the bust line and downwards to the end of my dart extension. So after we've taken out the back dart, we're going to go ahead and take our body measurements on these lines. The bust measurement divided by 4 on the bust line, the waist measurement divided by 4 on the waistline. On this waistline, remember to impute the darts that we're taking out. Remember to put it back, okay? And then after taking that waist measurement, we'll go to the hip line and take our hip measurement divided by 4. But before that, we'll use our ruler to connect from the armhole downwards to meet the waist measurement. So after marking that point out, we'll take our hip measurement on the hip line, hip divided by 4. Remember, we extended front with 1 inch, right? So I'm going to also extend this back with 1 inch before you make your connection from the waistline to meet the hip line. With this, our basic back is ready. What we need to do now is to determine how deep you want your top to be at the back. Okay, so from this bust line, I'm going to go up with 1 inch. On the bust line, go upwards with 1 inch and use your curve ruler, your slightly curved ruler, to curve it from the armhole to meet that 1 inch. Also, another thing you need to do before you make your curve, remember on the front line, on the front armhole, we came down with 0.5 because this top is not exactly on the armhole, right? So from that 0.5 now, you use your curve ruler to connect from the armhole to meet the 1 inch we went up with on the bust line. So on the upper part of this pattern paper is the yoke part, on the down part is the back that we'll be working with. So now, the next thing we're going to do is to mark out the length of this back. On the center back, especially because on the side back, it's meant to align with what you have on your front. So I'm going to follow that same curve that I have in my front, right? But for the center back, it has to be short so that you can sit comfortably. After attaching your bones and tying your eyelets, you're supposed to be able to sit comfortably. So make sure not to exceed 5 or 6 inches downwards from your waist as the back length. And with that, we have our center back and our side back. The next we're going to be doing now is the eyelet allowance. This depends on how widely opened you want that eyelet point to be at the back, right? So I'm using 1 inch for mine. You know, this pattern paper is meant to be on fold. So by the time you open up this 1 inch, the opening I have at that back point will be 2 inches wide. And also, I don't want it to be I don't want it to be opened straight down. I want it to have a V effect on that eyelet opening. So after coming in with 1 inch on the bust line, which is the beginning of my back, I'm going to use 0.5 on the hem, which is the down part of the top. And then I'll slant it. When I'm connecting it, I'll slant it downwards so that the opening will have a V shape opening. So I'll mark out this point now as our eyelet point, and then I'll go ahead and cut. So for the cutting of this back, it's very straightforward. Just go ahead and follow your sides and then the depth of the back. I'll relabel these lines now, the bust, waist, and hip, and we'll keep the back aside. Then I'll go ahead and cut the front. For the cutting of the front, the first thing you need to do is to close your side bust darts. So I'll tear open my side bust and also open the dart I have at the front so that I can close the side bust back before I go ahead and cut every other part of this front. That's because when you close the side bust, you're going to have a broken line from the waist to the armhole. So you need that to be corrected before you go ahead and cut out the excess paper that you have on the sides. So I'll go ahead now and speed this up, cut off all the darts, and then cut the 2 side fronts and the center front, and that will be that for the cutting of this front. And if you notice, as I'm cutting following my hip line. I'm not following the curves that I have on the top. This is because I have decided I'll be doing my curve after joining the pieces together on fabric. Okay, so the next thing we'll do now is to place this pattern paper on our fabric and cut. But before I do that, I'm working with a velvet. To make it easy, I'll go ahead and iron this stay to the fabric first before I cut. And after ironing and cutting, this is what we have. We are going to be stopping this part 1 of this tutorial here. In the next part, we are going to be seeing where we'll be joining all of these pieces together to make this beautiful corset top. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video, and stay tuned for the part 2, and I'll see you next time.